Gewalt. So what's this week? Parsha Shemini is this week's Parsha. The Yesodis. Every Parsha is the Yesodis. But I think it's brought down, the Ponovich Rov says, on the Pasuk is brought down that by Shemini Atzeres, it says, B'krei ve'akodesh, just to get an understanding of what we're discussing. Now, every single Parsha in the Torah is Ma'isa of a similar abonim, and a person analyzes the Parshas of the Torah, and he tries to take away the message that the Torah is trying to teach us. And the first thing before you go into any material you want to discuss, the number one thing you have to do is realize, like Rabbi Belsky once said, he said, before you translate a language, you have to know the language. You know what I mean? You have to know the language you're translating into, and you have to know the material that's being translated. Because if somebody doesn't really understand what the material, like I saw like Art Scroll translate the word sacrifice. They said, right, if you take the word carbon, there's no, it's not doing justice to the word carbon sacrifice, really. Because what's a sacrifice? To sanctify through a carbon, there's much more said in the word carbon, in a sense, than the English translation to it. Meaning, in other words, before a person makes a pirush, he has to understand the material and what he's dealing with, and the Kedusha v'Tahara. And that's why the amazing work of Art Scroll is fascinating to see, like with the command of the English language, but Yereim v'Shleim, how many times they take all the difficult, and there's such sensitivity to every subject, translating it, it's like that.
It's not the right translation.
Right. So meaning, in other words, right.
They do the best they can.
Right. But the point is, before we go into any parshas of the Torah and we analyze the need to learn out of it, the number one thing we have to understand first is, what are we dealing with? Who are we dealing with? What greatness of people, and not in any which way when we analyze and find a fault is that to put them down. If anything, is to the contrary. Their greatness proves to us, if they were held accountable for that, how much more magnified 1,000 million billion % is the message to us, how much more careful we have to be about it. So that's before we start first base.
As an achatas or
anytime we look at the Ma'isa Ovis and we're going to analyze the chet of the Bnei Aaron, of what's the name, Nadav Avihu, and we're going to try to find the fault in them. We have to first understand, the first thing is what we are dealing with over here. If you want to get a little bit of understanding of the tragedy of what happened by the Maisa of the Mises Bnei Aaron. So we have to first try to set our mindset to just what was the emotion of Klal Yisrael at that point.
We can't judge them.
No, not forget about judging, but at least somewhat to imagine what we're discussing with over here. No, it's impossible to understand, but at least somewhat of a wavelength in a martial sense to try to somewhat visualize what was going on over here. The Shemini Limilum, after the 7 days that Moshe Rabbeinu was Makriv Karbonis, and there was never an Eish that came down in the Shemayim until Aaron HaKohen got up there on the Shemini Limilum, and an Eish came down. So Klal Yisrael, the Am HaNivchar, you have the Ovis, and they went through Gehenim beyond words of Mitzrayim. And whatever that means, a Holocaust on steroids. In other words, it's not Stam a Holocaust, because it's a Holocaust of people of such greatness. It's not just the pain of the tsar of mises of children, but it's ki'ilu, the einish the Rabbi was giving them right after the Ovis, meaning, in other words, that was considered mem tashar tuma, for people of such greatness that they were given such strong din. And Leich Teich Acharai B'Midbar is a situation of Klal Yisrael going into a Midbar, it's Zocharti Lo Chesed Nurayich. As much as the Psukim, and it speaks about the defaults of Klal Yisrael, that's clear that it's Zocharti Lo Chesed Nurayich. It was a Chesed. I remember how Klal Yisrael in overall followed the Rebbeinu Shalom without food and without anything, and just the Dvar Hashem. And it's impossible to imagine what it means, an addicted nation to its leader into such a magnitude of emotionally connected of ruchnius.
That's what happened. That's why they stumbled by the Meraglim.
Right, and every one of the stumblings comes from a chet of simply they were drunk to be close. The Maisa Ha'egel came through being close. It was a big mistake. The Maisa Meraglim came from in the sense that they were afraid they wouldn't be able to live up to the call of duty of a Yid when it was they were living in a utopian state, as difficult as it is in a midbar shmama with nothing there. But when you're obligated and you're forced, there's nobody else but to be trust in Hashem. There's nobody else when it came to Akris Yamsuf, but there's a certain relationship between Rabbi Shalom that you'll never get that in Eretz Yisrael. In order to get that, you have to be in such a madrega every time you're kaycham va'itzim yadi to be able to work. When you're muchrach and you have nothing else but Rabbi Shalom, in a way it's easier in a sense. And they enjoyed that state of being so close to Rabbi Shalom. They didn't want to go. They're afraid to go into Eretz Yisrael for that. So the motives in every one of these cases were right, exactly. So it's impossible. It's not we're speaking about a bunch of kids at risk over here with a bunch of tattoos and earrings, and you Manteshari told me they're watching dirty movies. Hashem Yoachim, and you're speaking about Yidden which are Malachi Elikim. We have no asaga what we're dealing with. People which were madly in love with their bunch them such a madrega, and they were held accountable because you still have to. There's a leader. And you have to follow, and there's a dictate to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So as much as we're going to...
How do you blame Aaron Cohen for the eagle?
So that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying every single idea that we get into over here. So I just want to... that's Al Hakdam. So this Hakdam of the idea that it says Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron HaKohen B'Kroivei HaKodesh, and what does B'Kroivei HaKodesh mean? That I thought it was going to be with me and you, and now I see they're greater. And I see that Nadav and Avihu greater. He wasn't stam lip service. Moshe Rabbeinu pel daberbo that didn't eat for 40 days wasn't stam trying, saying the right comment to them. He says he says I thought B'Kroivei HaKodesh, and now I see that they're greater. The Psikta writes that Moshe that the Mokim in Gan Eden that Nadav and Avihu have is even higher than the Madrega of Moshe and Aaron. Moshe and Aaron, the Zohar HaKadosh writes, the Magen Avraham brings it down, that somebody that cries on the Misa of Aaron HaKohen, of Nadav Avihu, at Tovshin Pei, right, Muftachani, that he's not going to lose his children during his life. What does that mean to say? That means to say is, meaning in other words that he mourns the tsar of the Mises Tzadikim, Gedoyla Mises Tzadikim. That means to say it's so great the level to be connected with Nadav Avihu. The greatness of Nadav Avihu is so great that if you feel the sensitivity and you feel the tsar of what Klal Yisrael lost by that yoim of Akamas HaMishkan, you deserve that that a person deserves that he shouldn't have that kind of tragedy. That means to say the greatness of Nadav Avihu. When Moshe Rabbeinu said, I thought we were great, but now I see the greater within us, it's not lip service. That means to say the greatness of Nadav Avihu in a certain sense is greater than Moshe of Aaron. Not only is the Magen Avraham right that if a person, just imagine what the world would have looked like if Nadav Avihu would not have. And Moshe Rabbeinu would have been mifter, and like they thought that's what would happen. When Nadav Avihu came, we're going to learn in a second exactly what the Einish was, because they had very strong reasons to think, and it should have been, that they were they were the upcoming. They understood this B'Kroivei HaKadosh was Moshe Aaron. They were being realistic. They are the ones taking over. Nothing to talk about. It wasn't they were looking to buy a Satna Bekisha and they wanted to sit on top over there, and they weren't looking for a frak to be the Rosh Hashiva, because they saw that they were the next ones to take over, and let us prepare and let us get ready for the job. They were, and they heard a clear mashmoyis from Moshe Aaron, and that's taka what was, in a sense, what was supposed to happen. If Moshe Aaron, it says a big chiluk when Yeshua, Pnei Moshe k'Pnei Chama, Pnei Yeshua k'Pnei Levana. That means the Levana is the reflection of the sun. That means to say, right?
Yeshua ben Yotzek was today, today.
It says Yeshua ben Nun, that was the Talmud Neman of Moshe Rabbeinu. Lamaisa, it sounds like, had Nadav Avihu taken over, and they would have gone to Etzrol, Lav Dafka, the default of Klal Yisrael wouldn't have happened the same. If they would have had that level of Kedusha in Etzrol from Nadav Avihu, who knows? And that's why it's brought down, you should know, how come Parshas Shemini always falls out during Yemei HaSfira? What was the tragedy, if we think about, of Misa, of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva? Could you imagine what a world would have looked like if 24,000 Talmidei Chacham would have still been vibrant, alive today, and it wouldn't have been just 5 Talmidim left over? And the intensity of the Kedushas HaTorah would have been so vibrant, it would have been Mashiach 100 times over already.
Our scroll will not be able to keep up.
Yeah, they were not, yeah, that's right. Not only wouldn't they keep up, but the pshat is every one of us will have to write an art scroll. You know what I'm saying? That's meaning, in other words, the godless of the Torah, right? So meaning, in other words, so before we start first base, the first thing we have to know is we're dealing with Ma'alochim Elikim, but yet. Lilmad ani tzarich, and we have to still go through the Divrei Chazal to analyze what the einish is. It says by Yosef Atzadik, it says im zachartani. He asked the Sarah Mashkin im zachartani zok netoisef lo shtei shanim. He had to stay in jail another 2 years. The pasuk says in Tehillim Ashrei Adam. What does it say? That means Asher Shem Hashem Miftachai Ze Yosef. Kisha ani Yosef, Kisha im zachartani netoisef leishtoi shalom. David HaMelech writes in Tehillim, who is considered the spitz? Who's considered the greatest example of somebody who's muftach Hashem? Yosef. Why? Because when he said im zachartani, he got an extra 2 years. So, Frek the Beis Halevi, it sounds contradictory. Just the opposite. It seems like it was a chesron in Yosef's emunah that he had to come on to somebody else's help, and he had to play strings inside the government to get him out of there. If he was such a maimon, he was sat in the corner with his tone, so why is that kilu complimenting Yosef, that im zachartani, Zok the Beis Halevi? That's exactly the message. The greater level of a Baal B'tachin you are, the bigger tefiyah there is on you that you did ashtadlis. I mean, a person whose level is not so great. So then you have nachrais to do a shtadlis. You have to do the proper shtadlis in order to make a livelihood. The greater a tzaddik, a human being is, the greater he's allowed to be like Reb Shimon Bar Yochai that says that I'm going to provide for me. The guy that cheats on his taxes and then he promises that he has a munah and he wants to call. So you know what I'm saying, he's going to get. He's the same guy that's going to also. But a person who's taka, a maimin b'munah shalema, and how many achenu bnei Yisrael at Stroll of Yidden that lav davka are coming. I'm not chassid salvek people that come, but there are so many yireim u'shleimim that don't know how they're making from month to month, and they have a siyata d'shmaya. But I'm just bringing that out but the nekudas advorm, the greater level maimin you are, the more is expected from you. If you look into the psukim of Yosef, right? Yeah. If you look into the psukim of Yosef Atzadik, what does it say by Yosef? He didn't ask them. It wasn't like he was begging them to go. It was part of the dream, the way he was interpreting it. And you will go and tell Pari. It wasn't he was even asking, requesting it. It was basically the way he was translating what the dream was. That this is what the sequence of events are going to happen. But there was some dakis of some type of emunah, like trying to push something in. You, Yosef, who are the greatest madrega of emunah, that little ashtalish was a tfi on you. And therefore, when we look at greatness of people and we question, meaning we see an issue, it's adrab, it brings out the greatness of them. Klal Yisrael was in a midbar. Klal Yisrael went through a Mitzrayim, and everyone, by a little say that we try to depict what it means. Whether it's the murder, but more the concept of the tzur of Klal Yisrael that was at the Spitz, as Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and they were the most regal family, the provider of the land of Egypt, Yosef, and they were so backstabbed, and now the moral of Klal Yisrael was mamish in the pits. And you're speaking about the greatness of people that went through a midbar, and they're waiting for this, and by them, they're not looking for a new apartment, a new house, a new car. The only thing that these Jews want is one thing. I want to connect to your Rebbeinu Shalom. I'm only looking that the Rebbeinu Shalom has a nichusa. The first and the most amazing experience of a revelation, was that the right word, of the Scheiner showing Klal Yisrael, you're mine, I love you, was the day of Akamas HaMishkan. That means, after Chet HaEgel, and after the amount of people that died, and after the tzora that Klal Yisrael, and they were given the Torah. Now the Torah was the Rebbeinu Shalom present to us. Klal Yisrael, you got to perform, but you're unique, and this is what you got to do. That the Gilui Shechina is not the same level that I'm accepting a present from you. It's not the same, I'm giving you an instruction. This is the manual, because you are the chosen people, and you got to live up to it. And in fact, we were constantly held accountable until they were makabel the Torah again by the story of Purim. So the fact that it was Kaf Aleim Kegigas was the favor Hashem did to us. The fact that there was a Gilui Shechina of an Eish going down and accepting the korban of Aaron HaKohen, could you imagine the simcha? Aaron that felt completely, he didn't want to go next, he was afraid to come close because he felt that he had a shaykhis to the act of the egel. And he was afraid that who is he to bring a korban? And yet, he accepted the Dvar Hashem that he should do it. And the ritzui that was clear to everybody, Yorad Eish Min HaShamayim, Klal Yisrael, there's a mechila on the egel, you are mine. And it's brought down in the Medrash that he writes that right away when they put up when it was makar of the korban, the Eish didn't go down. It was only after Moshe and Aaron were mispalo. It says afterwards they went and they both were mispalo, and only afterwards it came down. And it was a gevaldige ritzui. Could you imagine? It's Mara Kohen when the Kohen came out of Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim and it turned white. The ecstatic joy of Klal Yisrael to see the black and white ritzui. I'm in love with you people. Could you imagine if there would be tomorrow a Shefer Shal Mashiach and says, Jews, you're all getting onto this plane. Every one of us, we forget any house that we're building, any car, anything, we're all running for, you know what I mean? If it would be so clear, visible, the Shechina of the Ritzui to the Rosh Hashanah, us, we were all going with sugar. Could you imagine Klal Yisrael then? This was the first time that a Gilui Shechina was so clear.
Imagine that.
So, right, I mean, the Simcha. The intensity of that Simcha was stirred with what? With Mises Nadav Avihu. Let us analyze for 1 second what the chet of Nadav Avihu was. There are many different shatim. I want to quote a Gemara in Eruvin, and I really is basing off this from the Sichas Moser. Chaim Shmulevitz, what he does always is he takes a bunch of different Gemaras and he brings out, you say this like a lesson Gemara. I was going through it, I said, so you say this Gemara after Gemara. So I think it was Kedai just to go through some of the Gemaras that he says to bring out. It says, Shehoire halacha b'fnei rabbo. The taina on Nadav Avihu was that they paskin before the Rebbe. Now, let's analyze that for a second. What does it mean to be moira halacha b'fnei rabbi? Judaism is the one place we're open to the most questions. The whole concept of Judaism is question and answer, right? You know what I mean? Ask any guy, this is, like you get pulled over by a cop, he says, I thought it was a red light, I was holding my phone, this is not a Gemara course, I just told you got the ticket and I still Gemara go weiter, right? A Jew, that's what a Jew is. Everything is a question and an answer, and because we're nosy people, and right, and the whole, like I saw from Nosson Vachvik, it says, that's why the whole Gemara is written in Shak Levitari, because that is what the question and answer is smeichem kenisimasim when you go through the question and the answer. We're open for questions of understanding. But Klal Yisrael has one Yesod that differs us from the Umas Olam. And it's brings down a Medrash. The Medrash says that Klal Yisrael is doimet ha'oif. Just like an oif, a bird. The wings, without its wings, it doesn't survive. It can't go anywhere. Without its wings, it will starve to death. It doesn't have a place to go to different climates. Its wings are its kufa, its chiyas itself. So to Klal Yisrael, without its manhigim, is like a knife. The eineim of Klal Yisrael is our leaders. That means to say, the concept of bittul das to Talmidei Chachamim, bittul das to doiros shalafanenu. The fact that Moshe kibul Torah Misinai u'Misoyer Yeshua is not a question of IQ level. And somebody that hit a certain IQ level, it's the Rebbe Talmud of being Mavatel Daitcha to your Rebbe to the nth degree. That concept of being Mavatel Das by being Moira Halacha B'fnei Rabbi means that the student, in a sense, took the leisure and the authority to disregard his Rebbe to a certain degree. And, he passed in the front of his Rebbe, in a sense, is thanks, but no thanks. I mean, in other words, I have my way of looking at it also. And what that is saying, in a sense, is that I don't see the Mesiras HaTorah as, it's like a Chachma, Mishar Umas Olam. What does that mean? Just like Shar Chochmas, the more intelligent ones are the ones that get, they're the ones that get free thing in Harvard. The ones that have good marks, because everything only deals with IQ, and that's really where it goes from beginning to end. Klal Yisrael is the kedusha of Klal Yisrael works, that it's bittul das, because the Gemara says that Rishonim kimalachim anu kibnei adam, im anu kichamorim Rishonim kimalachim. I'm sorry. In Rishonim kibnei adam anu kibehemis, and not even like the behemoth of Pinchas ben Yair. So I think I heard from a gifter. He says like this: if we view the door before us like malachim, and it's a completely different wavelength than we are, and we look at the doros before us as the kedusha satir, the connection that they had to mitzvahs and to Ratzon Hashem, we view them as their malachim, then we're mentioned. But if we look at them, listen, the nice kafar things, we have an opinion, and I also have an opinion, then we're like behemoths. And I want to go through a few Gemaras where he brings this out unbelievable. And he says like this. The Gemara says in Erevin Amaisa that it says that Rabbi Eliezer had a student, and this student paskined in front of him. He comes home and he tells his wife Ima Shol, and he says, I don't know, I'm not sure this student is going to live it out through the year. Kachave, Gemara says that he died that year. Right? So Zok Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, he said, I understand you. It couldn't be Moichel your Talmud. Says the Gemara says in Shabbos that Kol Shechaveri Nenesh Al Yodei Ein Machnis Noitzim B'Mechitzasei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why wasn't he Moichel the Talmud? Because he was Meir Halacha B'fnei Rabbi. So on that he says, also, he brings down another Gemara also. The Gemara says in Masechtas Me'ilah, and it says that Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yossi was walking together. It says Rabbi Yossi together with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, they're walking together, and they were asking, how do you know the tomb of Sheretz? And the son popped up from the back, Rav Shimon, and he said in Makar. And it says that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai turned back to him, and he says, what was his lashon? He says, Al Yachzer Ben Eitzlov. He threw out a very sharp. He shouldn't go. Meaning they were going to the emperor to help out Klal Yisrael because they were in a very difficult state. So Rabbi Eliezer was there, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi is the father of Eliezer, and they're going together for a certain cause that was going up against Klal Yisrael. As they're on the way, the two Talmidei Chacham, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yossi are shmuzing. What's the makar of Dam Sheretz? That's Metar. So Rabbi Eliezer said a pasuk, and he said it under his breath.
Who said
this Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer, this Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer, the son, he felt that was called Moira Halacha, which is a pella, because he didn't even say it l'shem yichud saying Moira Halacha. He was almost just throwing out in a learning setting.
Yeah, but wasn't Rabbi Yossi saying it to both of them, or he was asking?
No, means the two means Rabbi Yossi, the father of Eliezer, right, and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, which are friends together, are walking down, and the son is behind them, and the two fathers are speaking and learning. Right. And then from the back, the son, right, he just threw in his 2 cents. Right. And he says, I wonder if he's going to come back with us, meaning if there's going to be an oynish, that he's going to get an oynish. So, right, in other words, and Lamais, it turns out there was... Meaning Rabbi Shimon Yochai turns to Rabbi Yossi, and he says about his son, I wonder if he's going to... The chutzpah that he did, I'm almost wondering if he's going to come back in one piece.
Didn't he daven for him or something?
Oh, so on that he says, and he's exactly, right. Right.
Wow.
And he says, Lamais, he davened because he promised that he's going to bring him back. But again, the same idea, you see that there was a tremendous kakadu.
he wanted to just join into the...
Right, but yet it was considered, for the setting of the conversation, you have to know your place. And if two great rabbis are discussing it, it was considered a tefillin, right? He says, there's another fascinating Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechtas Chagiyah, but even before we get to that, is another Gemara. The Gemara says like this, a Gemara in Bab Metzia. And the Gemara says that Reb Shlokish was the head, right? He was the head of the thieves, and Rabbi Yochanan saw that he jumped over the river, and he says, "I will give you my sister who's nicer than me." Right? It says Shufra Rabbi Yochanan was Keshufra the Yaakov Avinu. I have a much prettier sister than me. And after he saw the koiches that he asked to jump over a river, stick. And he says, "Now what you're going to right?" And you bring her in, and he says, I'm going to give you my sister." I see you have koiches, you have to channel in the right place, I'm getting my sister. And Gemara tells us in Bab Metzia that they started discussing a sugi after he was a student, and involved in that sugi was a question about a knife, and one of when it was Makabel Tumah. And Rabbi Yochanan wanted to say was that after you finish making it, or after it was put into the oven and heated in a certain way. And Rabbi Yochanan threw out a comment to Shemini says, listen, you were there once upon a time, you know ammunition better than I do. You know words. That's right. And there, right? And on that, Rish Lakish turned back to me and says, so what did I gain by coming to the Bais Medrash to be considered a Rebbe when I was considered a Rebbe in the gangs also? Meaning, now. The Meforshim explain as follows. The way Rish Lakish said the comment, it's really the parak is, right, was B'loshen Oino. Oino means that, in other words, he was offended by Rabbi Yochanan, right. And Memeli is saying, right, meaning in other words, he was trying to say, right, but meaning he wasn't trying to say, okay, I'm insulted, so I'm going back to where I came from. Adrabah. He was trying to say is that meaning you can't look past my past. Meaning, you still look at me, meaning, in other words, when you see me, you still see me, meaning, isn't the tachlis of being a Talmud Chacham that you're in a different world and there's a concept of tshuva? Meaning, why are you belittling me? Not that Rish Lakish for a second says, you know what, take my arm out the window, Tzutz says goodbye, I'm off the derech right now. That's what he's saying. That happens today, right? No, that's not what he said. He was saying to him, no. Meaning, in other words, so if the tachlis of Torah is to elevate the person, make him into a greater person. So in other words, so meaning, why are you still like what's it called, opening up a can of worms about my past? Rabbi Yochanan understood it, that he was like saying, thank you, but no thank you. Meaning, in other words, I know you invested time into me, koiches to teach me Torah, but I don't really gain anything. I should really go back over there. And I could, over there I'm a Rebbe also. I didn't gain much by coming to UT Yeshiva. Right. That's the way Rabbi Yochanan understood it. Right. And Rabbi Yochanan understood it offensive. And he felt it was a tefillah, meaning, in other words, that's what you tell me? That who needs the whole thing? He taka understood it as he was saying, take the Yom King of Bar Charm out of here. Right. And therefore Rabbi Yochanan was offended. And it says that the wife of Rish Lakish came to Rabbi Yochanan and she says, do me a favor. I know you have a kaped on my husband now, just please have rachmanis on the children. My children shouldn't become Yisayimim. This is his sister telling his brother. I see that my husband messed up over here, because definitely the way the comment, it did not come over nicely. So I'm asking you a favor. Have rachmanis on me and don't do some kind of, turn him into a gal shal.
Wrong.
Right. And do me a favor,
How did she know anything?
Because I guess either she was around, or her husband came home. Rish Lakish told her what happened. He figured that Rabbi Yochanan it was clear that there was akpada. And he asked him, and and he quoted a pasuk to say that the Rebbe Yisrael is meracham on Yisayimim. Don't worry about it. Okay, your husband will die, nicht ekveld. The Rebbe Yisrael is going to take him. This is a Gemara. Mom, tell me a Gemara.
Your husband's going to die.
This is part of learning of Divrei Chazal, how we realize we're dealing with Malachim. It's impossible for a human mind to understand what this means. I'm saying it's beyond our comprehension.
I'm really angry at this.
Well, I'm saying, right? It's beyond our comprehension to understand people of this caliber of greatness. Right?
Was not funny.
Well, no. And it says that, and he died. It says, the Gemara says, so Lakish died. Because of this Maisa. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan had a nervous breakdown. Because it says, Rabbi Lakish, the Gemara goes on to say,
50 Talmidim and you wanted people to fight with them and learn.
Exactly. And the Gemara says, the Gemara says, he said he had a nervous breakdown until they were mevakish rachamim that he should die. Rabbi Yochanan should die after Rish Lakish was died, and he lost his chavrusa. And it says that they brought, I think Pinchas Ben Yor, who was it? They brought somebody else in there to learn. Not Rabbi Yochanan. They brought Rabbi Lezer, and every shtickle Torah he said by Shir, he brought him 24 rayas. Yes, so that's why he needed 4. He says, I want, exactly, challenge me. And therefore, he says, he had a zan nervous breakdown. And Rabbi Yochanan, after Rish Lakish died, and he lost his Talmud Muvik, he realized that he has no reason to live. He realized that there's no Talmud Chacham that's challenging him Torah. He felt useless for life. He couldn't imagine. There was nobody that was able to elevate him in Torah until he had a nervous breakdown. Ad kedei kach, the Meforshim say, so why weren't they mavakesh rachamim that he had a nervous breakdown, that he should get better? It says, because no, it wouldn't have helped. Because if he would have gone better and he would have chapped again, he would have had a nervous breakdown again. He was completely uncapable.
That was Rish Lakish.
I want to analyze for 1 second. The Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos that Rabbi Lezer cholash. Rabbi Lezer was sick. Rabbi Yochanan came. Rabbi Lezer was sick. Rabbi Lezer.
On the side.
He was sick. I'm telling you another Gemara in Brachos Tafei. It says Rabbi Lezer got sick. Rabbi Yochanan came to be Mavaker Chayil. So it says Golei Da'ara v'Nofek Nehura. Rabbi Yochanan was beautiful. He was handsome. He comes into this apartment, one of these real basement, you know what I'm saying, like a basement Lakewood apartment in the old days, not today, right? In Black Mamish, and no lights, and what's it called? And it's dark, so he rolls up his sleeves, and it says Gol Ladar. He rolled up his sleeves, and it became light. He was so beautiful that it generated light, and he sees the apartment. He looks around and he sees Mamish. The walls are black. Mamish like Rabbi Leibstein's apartment, you know, for the pictures over there, you know what I mean? The black walls, that's like Mamish, the video with the roller. And he says, he says, you're so poor. So Rabbi Lezer says, Oy vavoy to the leader of Klal Yisrael that doesn't realize that Tsar that Aniyim lived through. This is what Rabbi Yochanan. Anyhow, so it says over there that Rabbi Yochanan, as he was comforting him, Rabbi Shimon, and he's because it says Rabbi Lezer started crying. After they were in touch, they were schmoozing with each other. It says Rabbi Lezer, the chayil that was on the bed, started crying. So Rabbi Lezer cried. He said, Rabbi Yochanan says, why are you crying? So he says, Alei Shufra Dahai the Bola Ba'afrika Bachina. This beautiful person, you Rabbi Yochanan, the most handsome person in the world, you're going to one day be dead. They'll be under the ground. And this beauty is not going to be here anymore. And that's why he's crying. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you're right. Let me start crying also. And he started crying also. Frekta Masha, he never heard such a Gemara like this in his life. Rabbi Lezer is sick. Comes Rabbi Yochanan Mavaka Chayil Rabbi Lezer. And this is the conversation. The one who's sick on bed, Mamish has the cancer, ready to go out. He looks at this handsome man, he starts crying in bed. Why are you crying? Maybe you have aches and pains, I should call the nurse. No, because you are going to die. When am I going to die? Because look how handsome you are. Oh, you're right. Let's both start crying. Zok Masho Gevaldik. Rabbi Lezer turns to Rabbi Yochanan and he says like this. He says, you are the shufra of Yerushalayim. Meaning, Rabbi Yochanan was, right, Rabbi Yochanan the shufra doesn't mean how handsome he was in a magazine. Rabbi Yochanan's shufra was that Rabbi Yochanan, the great Rabbi Yochanan, lit up Klal Yisrael with his Torah. When somebody who came to Yisrael, a couple of years ago, you asked the guy, what are you doing at Yisrael? Get some Klal Yisrael, get some Chaim Kanievsky. Alei Shufra Dahai the Bola Ba'afrika Bachina. But Nochra, right? But it's like almost like saying after Chaim Kanievsky is gone, right? In other words, it's like who are we looking up to, right? In a sense, that means in other words, just like we understand by Chaim Kanievsky, that in other words that the door is so impoverished. That's where Rabbi Lezer was turning to Rabbi Yochanan. He's saying your greatness is so great that. And that Rabbi Yochanan says back to me, you were also from the last few people of that generation. Once you go, the next generation is not going to have much. Rabbi Yochanan, when he used to come and console, what was the greatness of Rabbi Yochanan? It says, Dein bira da asir bir. He used to walk around with a bone of his 10th son. He buried 10 children, 10 sons, and he kept in his pocket. He wrapped it up, maybe double wrapped it, like, he shouldn't be Makabal Tommy with exactly. And he used to come to the next Shiva house and calm the oil down. You want to see this? This is my kid, my youngest kid. I lost all my truth, my youngest kid's bone. I mean, the emotion of a human being like that, and that he used to be mechazik people. And he worked, now, and that means that didn't faze him for 1 second. This was the greatness of Rabbi Yochanan. The same Rabbi Yochanan, when he lost his chavrusa, had a nervous breakdown. He could not survive life anymore. When you took away the source of his Torah study, his connection in Ruchnius of Elikus, it's like you cut off his head, you cut off his hand. It's Moshel Ma'adavar Doime to taking a person, it's like, just like Reb Chaim, somebody tell him, I'm sorry, no more learning from now for the rest of your life, you have to go and read math books. And whatever, for that price, they'll shoot me in the head. I have no reason to live anymore. Rabbi Yochanan's greatness was any tragedy in life that was able to face him, he was able to deal with that. But when something of that caliber bothered him, he wasn't able. And so I want to ask you, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, why did you have a kapeda on Rish Lakish if you knew that your source of life is your chavuse? Make a pashta cheshbon.
Why did you daven for him?
Daven him, ni meichel him. He should have refuah shleima. Zok Reb Chaim Shmuel ever said there's more rice. I feel bad. I don't want to keep them too late over here. with all these Yesodis, he says one Zach. You know why? Because it's not a personal, you embarrassed me personally, and I have a tefillah on you, and therefore I have to be moichel. You stepped on my toe, you slammed the car door, and you took my seat.
Right.
By you negating what a Rebbe is, you are subconsciously defying what Mesiras HaTorah is.
David HaMelech forgave what's his name for throwing stones at him, and he said it's not him, it's Hashem, and he
right. Shem Megillah, it says,
he had the merit of being Hashem's fourth leg of the kiss.
Yeah, true.
He's praised.
But again, because that's a big difference. Right, no, right. And even though you're right, but no, it's not.
It's a little bit different.
No. That's the difference. The difference is like this: when somebody embarrasses the Torah, when the Gemara says we had in Sanhedrin about an apikuris. What's an apikuris? An apikuris is Maya Hanuli Rabbanan. Apikuris means he negates the quality of what Torah is. What is Mesiras HaTorah? What is the generation from generation? That is when a person challenges what his Rebbe is, and he doesn't like it. That's where it's not Melech Shamach L'Kvod Ein Kvod D'Mochel. But the point is, whatever the case is, there's a concept that the problem is the melech itself, meaning you mavaz the malchus. Over here, it's not a personal problem; it's the Mesiras HaTorah. And just to end off the Gemara in Chagiga, because I'm just Yanky, so I don't know where to start.
So why did he die?
So he says like this: because we're shlokish. The reason why there was a kapeda was because by him.
What's the translation of kapeda?
Kapeda meaning in other words, that when he was Meira Halacha B'fnei Rabbi, or Mezalzel his Rebbe, that means in other words, that means he doesn't view his Rebbe as Kodesh HaKadoshim, and
it bothers him.
Right. Yeah. So I just want to end off. I just think it's very. So
English translation.
So I just want to end off with the Gemara says in Chagiga, fascinating Gemara. The Gemara speaks about the 4 people that came Me'achir Parga. They saw that's the famous Acher went off the derech. Rabbi Kiva Yotze B'Sholem and the Ben Azi one went crazy because they saw Me'achir from the Kisei Yaakov.
What is that? They learned Kabbalah.
So it was like Ma'asim or Kava, but they saw something that either they weren't on that level to be able to deal with it.
They asked to see it and they were shown it, and then
the Gemara there says, yeah, but the parts.
The light
right? Yeah, exactly. So the Gemara in Chagiga says like this: Ki Oser Abdimi Oma Yutches Klolis Kil Yeshayis Yisrael. He says like the Ravdimi says, Yeshaya Hanovi is full. I think the most haftarahs of Yeshaya Hanovi of giving Musar, and giving Musar to Klal Yisrael. Musar after Musar of Klal Yisrael. You guys are bad. You have to fix them. You guys are. Zok the Ravdimi Yutches Klolis. There are 18 nevuos that Yeshaya Mamish knocked the Jews over the head. 18. Okay. V'loi niskara daitoi. And he didn't feel like he gave the Klal Yisrael over their heads enough to get them to do tshuva until he said the final one. And the Gemara gives a whole list of exactly that there won't be Talmidei Chachamim and there's not going to be Bali Hira. They're not going to be, meaning in other words, how Klal Yisrael over the generations are going to be. It's going to be Yeridas Adeiros, and the quality of what the Talmud Chacham was from generation is going to become minimized. And it says, what was the last one he said? He says, Yiravu Hanar Bezokin. That means Yirav is also of Gaiva. The Nar is going to become a Bal Gaiva to the Zokin, meaning he's going to like fife on the older. V'hanikle b'nichbed. The nikle means the shvacha one. So he says v'hanikle b'nichbed, and he says that was niskara daite, meaning because once he said that clothed them, he knew that he gave them the worst of the worst.
The shvacha what? The
shvacha, the nikle, and the Gemara says nikle means a person who averis are kaltim. All right, big deals. I turned on life and jobs. Big deals. I did something. B'nechbar, or to the person that has Yirah Shamayim, and when he doesn't have Aveira, it's a covetim. He has Yirah Shamayim. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, he has Yirah Shamayim. How could you do an Aveira? So the Kal is the person who's Kal. All right, fine, big deals. I did that. Meaning, Yiddishkeit doesn't mean much to him. And he's callous. In other words, he's not sensitive to what a mitzvah Aveira is. That means, in other words, it's the Amoritz who's going to go against the Talmud Chacham, and the Nar to the zaken, meaning he's not going to realize what a zaken is and what a nar is. And he says that was the worst klala that's possible. Why is that? Zok Reb Chaim, because you can have not the same level of Talmidei Chacham. You can have Talmidei Chacham, not the same Bali Mikra in generations. But once we lose the concept of there's a Gadol and his word is the law, and you're Mavata Dait, I don't understand it. But you keep, right? That's what the Rebbe said, and that's what you have to be Makabel and be a Shemeah. And once we're missing that gather of the Mesiras HaTorah, then we know that's Chorban. The Gemara says in the end of Saita, Pnei Ador ke Pnei HaKelev. What does that mean? Just like the Kelev constantly turns back. He runs ahead, but he's constantly turning back. It means he doesn't really have the ability to guide. But he runs ahead, and
he leads the leader.
He leads, but with uncertainty. He doesn't really know where he's going, but he runs ahead. That is the final blow of Klal Yisrael. In other words, it says you want to know why was considered. So everybody asks, he's happy, Yeshaya Navi, it sounds like, you know what, like it's that I give these kids over the head. It sounds like a menal was in a bad mood after a full day, and this kid, Purim, they put the spray paint all over the cars, and he says he locked things, and he walks out into the Rebbe's room afterwards, I got these kids good, I locked the door, and I said these kids are sleeping overnight, and I told your parents that they're not allowed to pick it for 3 days straight, like Yeshaya Navi speaking like this, until I mamish knocked their pants off, until I really gave them over the head. Until what was the final? The Mefarshim explain, he was Niskar Daita because he knew when it's a state of Klal Yisrael that there's the leader, we're not machshav our leaders, and we don't have our own personal das Torah, we're guided by a Rav, and we're guided by someone that we're meshubah to, and not every yukal has an opinion. Every person, I'm speaking to myself, not to anybody else, I'm speaking to myself because it's the hardest thing. We look at the generation I grew up in. Who's my Rabbi? I'm saying, of course we had Rabbeim. Yeah, and you don't want to call Rav for every little thing, and yet, but that concept of keep your mouth shut, and the Azoit Rav Gezok. I was once in Vision, and many times, and they were speaking about, like a major chinuch thing for the parents. So somebody got up and they said a gavaldig avort, and he was saying to the parents, he says, when you sit around the Shabbos table, and you sit there mocking the Rabbonim, so you're shooting yourself in the foot, because now your child knows, Azuktis, okay, so how do you? So it's your own chesaron, because then if nobody has any value to whatever they say, so then you don't have to be guided by do whatever you want your kid, right? That he should have a guideline to a certain extent. You know what I mean? That now he comes home, now he goes to sleep. But if the chinuch in the house was that the Rebbe said it doesn't mean anything, so nothing. So then nobody has to say. Right? But if we know. I had to give my wife credit. This was a funny thing. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I was poked on the way here. My wife definitely wears the pants more than I do in the house. It's like funny. I was telling one of my daughters. My wife went away. She's telling one of my daughters that you have to make sure to go. She says, "Yeah, Mommy told me I should be in bed." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if I listened like that to my mother." She says, "Mommy said she has to be in the bed." Don't worry. The next day she was out of the bed the whole night also. But the way she answered it, I was, it's like, in other words, if a person is able to be guided, not. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Asay l'charav. Asay l'charav means that a person, it's not the level of Torah as Rabbi knows. Of course, if a person is able to be mevatlas das as leader, and is able to become, if you want to understand what the destruction of the door is, what a person personally has to work in, when you hear an Issa D'Rabbanan, and you hear something, so even though it doesn't really, you have a hard time challenging with it, a hard time making sense out of it, but like who am I? You know what I mean? Who am I? I have another opinion. I'm saying every guy that gets on YouTube, whatever, and he throws out his own opinion. I was reading one of these technology books from they put it from the tag. I was so there are two chidushim I had this last couple of days. One was about the Pesach hotels. I used to think, what's the problem? But Pesach, you always drop yeshiva, Of course, people have to go to Pesach. Those is very good. It's necessary. But for regular families to go there, it's probably tznius is not great. Maybe kasher is not great. Guy told me, that's not the problem. That's not, he was telling me, I go in all the years to Pesach hotels. I told my mother, I'm not going back this. I said, why not? He says, it's the most lonely storm of the year. Because this guy's yanting with his family, this one's changing a diaper upstairs, there's only 2 people sitting by the meal. No, I'm saying, it's like everybody's, you're very lonely. He's like trying to explain how lonely it is. You think there's so much action. When you're in your own dining room, this one's on the couch, this one's over there, you're all together. There's a certain together, there's an achdus together. It's amazing how, there might be much more noise and much more action, but there's so much more yechidus in a sense. There's an idea, right? Meaning there's an idea that when a person is mavatal daita to somebody greater than him, so in other words, it's the best thing he could do for himself in a sense of growing up. If there's something to take out of this parsha, that the greatness of the tzora of Misas Nodav and Adiu is considered kol ha'moyer d'mois. And just to end off with this hargosha, I said it 4 times already, it's like this. It says Achrei Mois is mentioned in the Misas Nodav Adiu. So why is it the only place in the Torah that you have that Mamish 2? It's Parshas Shemini and Parshas Achrei Mois. The Torah says Kimayim la'yom mechasim. What's the Lashon HaPasuk over there? It says Kimayim la'yom mechasim. It means the Torah is like yam. Just like a yam, when you look at it from the outside, it looks like it's one flat thing. Only when do you realize how deep it is? When you jump into it. The more you jump into it, oh my goodness, it goes down, 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 down. Yiddishkeit, Klal Yisrael, is very unique because we're all religious. If something like Amnon Yitzchak said, Ma bayat, kama zman lokach shachrit. 25 דקות, עוד 7 דקות מנחה, עוד 7 דקות מעריב, 2 דקות שמירת הלשון, זה יהודי, מה אכפת לך? He's like selling it like mamish, like an eBay, but big deal, what is it? And he's right, because when you want to get people, but we know that Yiddishkeit, the more intense you want to make it, the more it will be part of your life. You want to go to 1 shir a month? Fine. You want to do it daily. The more you want to involve yourself in Yiddishkeit, the more a person becomes a ruchnius kind of person. And the more a person becomes a ruchnius kind of person, the more he realizes how small he is to the generation before him of greatness. When a person doesn't really understand what Shas is and what Gemaras are, so then he doesn't appreciate what a Rashba's Kash is, because he has no connection to it. The more the person is involved, he knows one Masechta and Rashi. Forget about Rashi. I'm saying you look on the Mesilas Hashas where he knew more and every hesber, so that automatically causes more achna. So the more involved the person is in Yiddishkeit, the more he realizes this concept of the Yeridus Aderes. When does an average Yid feel the most intensity of his Judaism the whole year? By Ne'ilah. But more like by Ne'ilah, to end the Ne'ilah. When already you know, okay, listen, I did it. What?
Not for him?
I don't know, unless your mom was crying, you're misifta over, you're telling how much you love your Rabbi. I'm saying usually, right? Usually the intensity, right? Usually the intensity of a Yid, not by Mincha, because by Mincha we're all nauseous with headaches. It's usually by the end of Ne'ilah when you're like, oh my goodness, you already see the coffee coming, your coffee, and Lamais, you put in a full day's work, right? So that's when a person feels that he's, that's when he feels like he's involved in Yiddishkeit. In that Nakuda, I mean, when do we discuss the idea of Misas B'nai Aaron? Is when do we appreciate what meaning to realize what the avlo considerable for the greatness of these people, that the Meira Halacha and Ad Kedei Kach, that the Rabbi Shalom used this at the happiest, most extreme day of revelation when it was the Mishkan. He wanted Klal Yisrael, Rabbi say, it's not a freebie. Yes, there's an avo she'ein kamoyu, and there's no way to describe the greatest form of a Yeridus Eish Min HaShamayim. But it's not a hefkervelt. And just because you're emotionally involved and you decide you want to chop another Shemini Esrei now, and that doesn't work that way. There's Hanaga, and there are Gedolim, and there's authority in Klal Yisrael, and there's bittul das to people that are greater than you in Torah. And when a person thinks, as Erez Balabas, to start challenging that who said that Rav is, and he gets involved in politics of Rabbanim, he's Eish Echlosam. He's Mamish, that's Mamish, it's Eish. The Mishnah says in Ovis, what's the Lashon over there? What's the Lashon? You should stay next to Talmidei with the fire of Talmidei Chachamim. Zohir begach the bite of Talmidei Chachamim is a fox. This guy has a day what meaning? Stam, a random person is challenging what Gedolei Torah is saying. So if the guy is a litvak, he's a chassid, he's chassid. He's in young Israel, young. Why? Wherever you are, you have rabbeim. Those rabbeim you're guided by. It's not, you don't have an ignorant that. And that's if we.
But the problem is that today there are so many, unfortunately, phony rabbeim.
But you have to find asay l'chora. That's your job. The fault is not in Yenim. The fault is in ourselves.
Even by Moshe, even they tell us Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu moved to Ohel, afterwards they would just say he was dealing with Eish.
Right, exactly. That's the people we're dealing with. Right. But that's people. And therefore, if we want to walk out of the Parsha of Musar Haskell, what is this Parsha teaching us? I think that is the lesson that we should be able to see. That with the Kedusha is the bittul das. And when do you feel more, the more involved. So I think what we all have to do together is learn more. And get more involved in the Eish Chelos of Torah to realize what this Matana Torah is, and through that, there's no way to appreciate Torah unless you learn it. And you can't compare hearing a shir to learning a Blat Gemara like a mensch, and to understand the Kasha and the Teretz. Sit down for a half hour, 45 minutes a person. I'm thinking myself only. And to connect in a way that to really be vibrant in Yiddishkeit, that's the way a person. But otherwise, it's just like, okay, nice, fine. Was straight out a cup, I fetched the money. And with that, I feel bad. I'm Yanky because they gave me the mic. Should be Zeicha.
Yes, I have.
Let's say bracha.
Huh?
You're saying a bracha.
By bracha had it for everybody giving the chesed that everybody did, listening to this Nebuchim Gaman, Yanky for that. We should all be Zeicha, that we should tell the Rabbi Yishlom that Klal Yisrael, every one of us really, we want to do the right thing. But it's so, it's so hard, the setting of life, to find Rabbeim and to be Mevatla our das. But Rabbi Yishlom, we want to do your Ratzin. And here Klal Yisrael yearning that you should be able to make it easier for us to come to the tachlis already, because Mahoben Shem kan koiches nicht, and we should be zoiche bezois hashona, that ad kan, we have to tell the Rebbe we can't any longer, and he's going to vow to bring the Yeshua. There's Avtocha, right, that it's going to come and it's going to happen. We have to look at our door and ourselves and say that Rebbe Yishlom, we're holding in the. This is the end. There's nothing to talk about. This is definitely the end. You ever saw a Pnei Ador? I'm speaking about myself, nobody else. Who's my Rav? Okay, Rabbi Hirschman in Toronto. I ask him a shayla every 4 years. I ask him a shayla. You know what I'm saying? Where's the Rabbeim?
No, totally.
Right, yeah, I'm saying. So what's my have a Rav ask a shayla to? Yes, any major Ershadim we ask a shayla. But to be mevatel das to somebody who's a Rav and to say it's beautiful that we're all in love with each other. But everybody has to find a personal guider of something. And with that, we zoiche that mamish we were able to have the Shechina, because that is what's necessary for Shechina. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.